continuing to a series on the working class and capitalism today. To mark International Women's Day, tonight is on women and the class struggle. Tonight we have four speakers. First we have Liz Leicester, who is the chair of Camden Unison. Then we'll have Clara Osagiadi, who is the RMT Cleaners Grade rep. And then Sheila Cohen, who is the author of Ramparts of Resistance. And then Mary Partington from Left Women's Network. Okay, we'll get going with Sheila. Oh, sorry. Liz. Sorry, Liz.
Okay.
Liz.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Liz Leicester, as has been said. I guess I've been active in Camden, what was Camden Now Go, and then became Camden Unison since 1988. As a women's group representative, as an education officer, and then as the chair, first of Now Go and then the chair of Unison. And through all that time also involved in various socialist movements and groups. I reflected upon this, and I did wonder, and I did say to Chris, I wasn't sure what I could actually contribute, but I hope not to bore you. I'm sure some of the things I'm going to be saying to this group of people are very, very commonplace. So as I say, I hope that some of the experience will be an interesting one, and some of the things that I have to say, as I reflected on what is important about this day, will actually have a resonance. So I'll have a go. First of all, as I say, as a socialist, I would always say that the struggles of women and self-activity of women is very much part of the collective struggle for self-emancipation by the whole of the working class. And I've always seen it in that context and feel that's where we have to place the issues that get called women's issues. A small quote, which I think is good, which is something that I think the Commune has actually published on the website from François Chenet. Inequalities and oppression do not exist separately from each other. They translate into concrete realities, the way in which this mode of production capitals and functions. For me, that's at the center of this discussion about women's issues. But there are some very real and concrete things. There is an estimate, for instance, that women internationally do twice as much unpaid work in the home as they do paid work, and this is not unimportant. But women in paid work are still dominated by a patriarchal system as well as class domination, even in countries where some progress has been made, such as this one, in reducing women's dependence on men. However, now we see in the oldest capitalist countries, again, such as this one, major attacks coming up, there's no doubt about it, on childcare, abortion rights, other services, so the so-called social wage, the things that actually women have won through struggle. But of course, in larger areas of the world, extreme poverty, exploitation, violence, rape, semi-slavery, or even slavery of women and children, and I think children are an important part of this discussion, though I'm not going to be focusing on that. I do think that's a major issue. The situation of women. According to UNICEF, again, in the world's least developed countries, many of which are at war, women are 300 times more likely to die in childbirth or from pregnancy-related complications than in developed countries, and the highest rates of maternal deaths wouldn't be a surprise to anyone, again, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. These are figures which are available, but it does remind us of the extreme situation of most majority of women in the world. I then reflected a bit on what the origins of International Women's Day were, and again, this audience may well know this, but for me as somebody who comes from the United States, it's quite interesting because that is a crucial part of the world, and the American working class is a crucial part of whatever we're trying to do, that actually its origins go back to big strikes by garment workers in the United States, women garment workers. In the turn of the century in New York City, there were 65,000 women employed in the garment workers' trade, more women employed than in any other city in the United States. Most of the young single immigrants working for very long hours. And on the 8th of March 1908, 15,000 women marched in New York City demanding shorter working hours, better pay, voting rights, and an end to child labor. Their slogan was bread and roses. Bread for food and roses for a better quality of life. And in a sense, 100 years on, you could see again for most women in the world that would be still what they'd be fighting for and what they'd want. There was a big strike then a year later, which was called the Uprising of the 20,000, which was, again, women in the garment trades, aged mostly between 16 and 25. And they struck for 13 weeks. Violence, arrests, intimidation, etc. But it did give rise to a designation of a Sunday, last Sunday in February at that point, as National Women's Day initially. And then again, which people here will probably be very aware, this was taken up by Clara Zetkin, the Second International, and in 1910 at a conference where 100 women were there from 17 countries, this was declared. And again, the quote from the resolution: in agreement with class-conscious political and trade union organizations of the proletariat of their respective countries, the socialist women of all countries will hold each year a Women's Day. The Women's Day must have an international character. This actually, as everybody again will know, spread most dramatically in Russia, where there was a major strike against the advice of the Bolshevik Party, where women walked out of their Petrograd factories calling on workers to join them. At the end of it, 20 to 30% of the workforce were actually on strike on February 23rd, 1917, which is March the 8th in our calendar. And then, interestingly, because I think this part got to be part of the discussion, down through the years, I'm not going to trace the history of it, but in 1977, the UN General Assembly picked this up. And now, in all kinds of places, a lot of former Stalinist countries, this is an official day, this is a holiday, men give flowers to women, etc., etc. So it's become something very, very different in a lot of places, but not everywhere at all. I think there's some very genuine still celebrations and struggles, celebration by fighting, actually, of women in some of the countries of the world on this day, or yesterday. In terms of the British working class and women in Britain, I guess we would want to say, first of all, that the law has not actually done women any favors here, equalities law. If you look now, very interesting figures. Women now outnumber men in trade unions just in Britain. 29.7% of women workers are in unions, 27.2% of men. So we've just passed. Now, a lot of that, of course, is because of the decline of manufacturing industry, traditional male-dominated industries, and the rise of the service sector. But 30 years of equal pay laws outlawing sex discrimination at work and women's inequality in the workplace are still totally prevalent. And again, as people here will be aware, women in full-time work earn 81% of the wages of men in full-time work. The gender pay gap is even wider if you look at men who work longer hours and often more likely to get overtime. And again, another figure, part-time women earn 59% of the average hourly male earnings, and this hasn't changed for over 30 years. There are now lone parents make up a quarter of families, 90% of lone parents are women. There are an increasing number of women in the workforce. But in the current situation, which is interesting, probably because there are more women working, women are being hit harder by redundancy now with the crisis here and the recession, and almost double the rate of the male increase in redundancy rates in the last year. And